I guess we already have the measurement systems because we're already disclosing, but I think we need to we need to change our incentive mechanisms to reflect what's actually driving things in the world. And this is another place where I think there's a real opportunity to lean into what business is good at, right? We have all kinds of leading KPIs and lagging KPIs, and we worked out what leading metrics, if you land them right, are going to translate into the right lagging metrics. And so we just need to be pushed to bring that same expertise into climate. And those will look different to different businesses, right? Mm-hmm. The right leading indicators for Mars will be different than for an automaker, maybe even different for a different food company, because they're just not set up the way we are. They don't think the way we do. And so that's where, the burden needs to be on us to figure that out, but it's always in service of those lagging greenhouse gas emissions metrics.
Well, and a lot of companies are, at the C-suite level are, afraid to make the commitments and do the action because they just don't think they know enough. It's complex. They don't want to project out, and the truth is we've got a lot, how many years of financial metrics, and this is a new space. So how do we get up the learning curve on that from your perspective? Is it?
I mean, investment of time, but at the risk of sort of challenging the premise of the question a little bit, is if we knew everything we needed to know to set the targets, if we knew what the strategies, we knew what they were going to cost, we knew what it would take, that's not a senior leader decision, right? When there's no ambiguity, you don't need a senior leader, and if there's really no ambiguity, you don't even need a person. It's just an algorithm. Right? It's just a formula in a spreadsheet, and it just happens automatically, and you have a control system that does it, and it's no big deal, right? The whole point of being a senior leader is making decisions with incomplete information. And we do this all the time on things that have nothing to do with climate or sustainability writ large, right? People decide, business leaders decide we're gonna take the business in a new direction. We're gonna expand from just selling pet food to having what we call a pet ecosystem. Mm-hmm. And now we've got a huge veterinary health business.
Yeah, I've used it. It's very good.
Yeah, and so when that decision was made of we're gonna move from being pet food to pet care and have this ecosystem, there was no P&L of how that was going to look. There was no. I mean, there was like we're gonna go here, we're gonna go there. It was boxes and arrows on a PowerPoint, right? And that's what.
Yes.
That's what drove the leadership. And then over time, people have filled in all the details and the org charts and the P&L and the investment models. And so we just need to adopt the same mindset here.
Yep. So Shakti, what are you seeing in terms of the big levers to get action from your perspective? And I don't know if you want to talk about on the policy side at all, if you feel comfortable. I don't know how much you all have the students engaging in policy. I know you train them for climate negotiations. So what are the big levers at this point to get the action we need?
Yeah, I think there are a few big levers. One is, of course, what are we subsidizing, what are we incentivizing, and what are we disincentivizing in policy? And for this to be a clear and transparent decision, we really need to have this be democratic and decisions made by the people and by governments. So one of the clearest levers is, the fossil fuel industry is hugely subsidized. Subsidies tend to skyrocket during moments of crisis. They need to end. And subsidies for other unsustainable industries need to end, and that is a huge policy lever, and one that we've been skirting for decades, that industries have been ensuring don't go away. So that's one major lever. I think another policy lever is just what businesses can thrive in a country, in a city. What businesses are being prioritized? What are we incentivizing? There's a lot of business opportunities that are not very well invested in. Energy efficiency can be a huge job creator, and it is consistently underinvested in the energy sector. We are seeing incredibly slow rates of growth for energy efficiency, despite it being a low-cost technological suite of solutions with numerous health, social, environmental co-benefits that tend to create exponentially more jobs than other sectors of the energy sector, and it's not being invested in. It's not being incentivized. There's very little incentive for companies to start up in this space, for young people to join as employees in this space. So that's just one example, but I think the question really is around what are we incentivizing and disincentivizing? And currently, I think we have the incentives and disincentives all wrong, and we need to basically flip them. So that's the policy lever that we should be most focused on. And we can only maintain that focus in the next 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 25 years, if we have kind of democratic integrity, when governments are able to make this decision based on prioritizing the needs of their people and of the environment over kind of growth for the sake of growth.
Yeah, I do not disagree with anything you have said there, and I also it's a challenge in the how, right? Like literally how you get that done. I haven't really opened my phone to see what's happened in the United States in where I am from, and we had a very important midterm election, and we had major policy victories just recently with 3 important bills getting passed. Among them, the Inflation Reduction Act that's going to pour billions in and will create a ripple effect of even more. Not one Republican voted for that. So it seems like we have a bigger challenge, almost like a cultural challenge. I feel like I'm asking you guys all these impossible questions, but when you think about this from your perspective, the student perspective, are you engaging at the local level? Are you trying to change at the national level? And can you see some more about the how of getting that done? Maybe even a little bit on if you address any of the cultural changes or the mindset changes that need to happen.
Yeah, for sure. And I think ultimately it's a challenge of imagination, of collective reimagining of our future and what we want our lives to look like, what we prioritize. And young people are engaging at the peer-to-peer level, community level, national level, international level. We were just talking over there at the Hydrogen Transition Summit yesterday, a couple of young people. We've been reading IPCC reports since we were 12. We've been poring over them, trying to understand all the terms. We've been attending conferences, unpacking the frankly impossible to understand agendas of conferences like COP, learning all the jargon, trying to engage in the process in a constructive and productive way. So young people are putting in the work at the international level, at the national level, at the community level, while also inspiring their fellow youth, their families, to get on the streets and push from the outside as well. And so young people have been playing this role in both spheres and really fighting an uphill battle. So I think that's where the imagination piece comes in, is more than any other group that we've seen in our experience, at least, young people are uniquely capable of mobilizing their peers, their communities, their families, because we have to be real that if we are looking at this impossible task, we will need a lot of behavioral changes.
Yes.
We'll need a lot of lifestyle shifts.
Yes.
We'll need a lot of cultural shifts. We need people to think about, okay, what is essential in my life for me to be happy, for my community to be thriving? Is it an endless accumulation of material goods? Is it, accumulating mass amounts of wealth? Probably not. I think we know that. But as a society, we haven't prioritized that.
Yep.
And I think that's where young people can come in and say, this is what we want our lives to look like. And, youth are doing this despite facing immense uncertainty in trying to survive in this system. So we don't know what the future of our jobs will be, or I certainly can't afford a home in Vancouver where I live. So we have uncertainty about every aspect of life. And yet, this is what drives us to focus on what is important to be happy, successful, thriving. And I think that's the root of the question we need to get back to.
Okay.
And that's when we'll have real action.
I love that. I can attest to that on a personal level. I've been doing this work for over 25 years, and I have a 15-year-old daughter who has went vegetarian about 6 years ago and has changed our eating habits of our whole family. The latest thing is zero waste and trying to completely eliminate plastic. You know how hard that is right now? It's nigh impossible. So that is one next big challenge to figure out from a greenhouse gas, toxics, and waste perspective, and with the petrochemical industry. Anyway, I completely agree with you. There's going to be change driven from young people, and they are pissed off that we have let things go the way we have. So we have a little bit of a chance here to act. Dexter, what do you think going forward? Where do you see the big opportunities to move from commitments to action are?
Well, one of the funny questions in the CDP questionnaire, which I'm sure everybody loves, is what activities to reduce emissions. And funnily enough, we get tens of thousands of activities to reduce emissions disclosed to us every year. And one of the points that you were mentioning about energy efficiency. And in fact, I remember when I started at CDP, we were looking at this data. Almost half of the most effective emissions reductions activities were always this category called energy efficiency building fabric. And it remains the case today. It's totally unsexy, but my God, is there significant bang for buck, particularly for emerging markets, for companies starting to disclose in India and China in the supply chains of a lot of our big member companies. These guys are seeing payback periods of less than a year on energy efficiency projects. I mean, these are really simple, straightforward things. And I know there's a lot of America bashing, but we take Britain for a moment, and there's this very odd movement in Britain to attack these guys called Insulate Britain, right? And all they want to do is, insofar as I could work out, is drive insulation in homes, right? Okay, very straightforward, totally. But for some reason, it really riles people in Britain, and they get really cross about the idea of insulating Britain. And there's some kind of straightforward building fabric initiatives that companies can really just invest in right now that can make quite a significant change. And of course, the point I always make is 11.4 times the average company's emissions are actually in their supply chain. So if you've gone through all of the really heavy lifting, reducing your emissions in your own operations, you look out to your supply chain and you see massive opportunities to reduce emissions there in different parts of the world.
Well, so clearly climate is the biggest business opportunity of this century, right? We have an immense challenge, and whoever figures this out, all the people who figure this out are going to do very well as businesses. So what do we do to help get more companies engaged on that and think about how to, well, that's one question, and depoliticize it, or think about communicating about it in a different way. The fact that Insulate Britain was excoriated, it'd be interesting to understand why. So what do we do to present this in terms of pure business opportunity, the vision for the future of well-being, and not let this become politicized? Do you want to try and answer that one, Kevin?
I worry that most of the companies that are going to do this on a voluntary basis are already moving.
Yeah.
Right? So you mentioned earlier there's, starting to see decline in new companies making commitments, right? And so I worry that we've gone, obviously there's still a lot of results and performance that can come from all those companies, but in terms of getting people on the bus, so to speak, I think all the people that are going to vote themselves onto the bus, or many of them, may have already gotten there. Which is not to say we shouldn't keep pushing and we shouldn't keep trying to make the business case and keep trying to tell it and sell it. But that's my worry. And I worry a couple things happen from that. One is clearly we'll fail because it doesn't work to have climate responsible business as a niche, or climate responsible countries, or climate whatever, right? This only really works if 97% of every bit of emissions, somebody's doing something about it, right?
Yeah.
There's always going to be a little tail of rogue stuff going on. But so I think that's the first thing I worry about. The second thing I worry about coming out of that is that it will result in people outside the business community trying to get the people that are on the bus to do even more. So go sort of beyond what would be kind of their fair share and start to do more to effectively try and subsidize the behavior of the companies or the governments or countries or whatever that aren't on the bus. And ultimately I think that's a failing strategy, because we'll never be able to the people that care will never be able to do enough to compensate for the people that don't care. And so I think increasingly we've got to find a way to make this regulatory, right? And move this into a compliance thing. And so I think some of the CSRD and EFRAG and SEC and it's all heading the right direction. But I think that's what we've really got to get to. And sort of made the second thought, and then maybe moving to a slightly more hopeful tone. I think the third pivot that we need to drive, and I think this could be effective both for the private sector and for policymakers, is it's one of the sort of the great logical fallacies that if you ask people, how much has your life changed in the last 10 years, 20 years? They can tell you this incredible story, right? 20 years ago, I didn't have kids. Next year, I have a son going to college, right? 20 years ago, I was a newlywed now, right? And so, incredible amounts of change. When you ask people, how different is your life going to be 10 years or 20 years from now? And they go, oh, it'll be about the same. Maybe I'll get promoted once. My kid will go, right? And so it's this lack of imagination that despite all this incredible evidence that things change hugely over time, we're unable to project that into the future, right? And so I think from a climate point of view, what that means is, all the fossil majors presume they'll be able to keep selling everything they're selling. And we all sort of think, well, yeah, there's a storm now and then, and there was a bit of a drought, but we sort of assume that's going to be the same going forward. And so I think the more we can actually get people to embed that that's the wrong forward planning assumption.
Yeah. Right.
And your planning assumption shouldn't be that you're going to keep growing 3%, 5%, 20%, whatever a year. But, if you can work through a scenario, well, actually this climate factor or this carbon pricing or whatever means actually we're going to decline 10% a year. And there's a whole bunch of stuff we need to do to even hold on to our revenues as they are right now. So it's that forward planning assumption that I think we need to change in people's head of what's already here and what will continue to be coming from a climate point of view, and then what that means to people's lives, to people's income, to people's welfare. So I think that's what is, I think, the most realistic pathway to getting the sort of more comprehensive level of adoption and change that we need if we're actually going to solve this.
Cool. Alex, how much time do we have? 2 minutes. 5 minutes, thank you. Okay, so we've got 5 minutes. Let's do a lightning round. Can you leave the audience with one thing that you're finding hopeful here? Dexter, you want to go first?
Well, one of the reasons I'm still at CDP after 14 years and haven't taken the corporate chilling, as we say, is basically that I see every day in the supply chains of major corporations the change that we've kind of gotten used to with the S&P 500 and the big listed corporations around the world. But I see the big buyer talking to their supplier, getting them started on the journey, and the supplier saying, oh, that was really interesting. I didn't know that was going to happen. I didn't realize that if I implemented that type of project, then that could, and all of that positive
momentum.
Yeah, and that's what's really kept me engaged at CDP for all these years, is seeing that impact of disclosure on the ground in China, in India, in countries around the world, companies really just starting on this journey, identifying areas to reduce emissions, and then getting that feedback from their big customers like Mars saying, oh, great, really getting that positive feedback. So that's one of the levers I think that can change things, is that B2B lever that crosses regulatory boundaries, and you can actually have a de minimis set of standards that you can implement in your procurement policy that kind of manages the fact that some regions have very light regulatory requirements in this space.
And Shakti, do you want to give me your perspective?
Yeah, I'm finding a lot of hope in this conversation. As a newcomer to these kinds of spaces and just feeling kind of uncomfortable as a young person at these conferences, honestly, this has been a really frank conversation, and that I really appreciate. And I was also thinking, I read this article once about a mochi shop in Japan that has been operating for 1,000 years. The same family has been running it. There are, people who repair all manner of things in my hometown. They'll fix your blender, they'll fix pans that have holes in them. And sometimes our current economic structure or the way business is going might see those as, oh my gosh, why haven't they franchised? Why haven't they grown? Why haven't they exploded? They haven't taken over. Are they failures? Or are they the best business successes of all time? These kinds of businesses. So that kind of thinking gives me hope, and a lot of young people kind of approaching entrepreneurialism in that way of, this is a cooperative. We are working with our communities to provide a service. We're not looking to take over. We're not looking to become billionaires. We are looking to live really good lives for ourselves, for our families, for everyone around us, and produce something valuable, reduce our impact. That gives me hope, approaching
Awesome.
business and entrepreneurialism in that way.
Yep. Kevin.
So first I would say well, I won't tell you to not feel uneasy, but just recognize everybody here feels that same way, right? Cops and these things are crazy. No one really knows where they're going, and it's just embrace it. So everyone else is faking it till they make it too, so don't worry about it. I think the thing that gives me hope is, as we continue on our journey in Mars and we push deeper and deeper into this, it's the 500 examples of my guy in the utility room with the project in his drawer, right?
Yes.
The more we dig into this, the more we get the people that are expert at whatever it is they do for Mars involved in this, and give them the task and the challenge and the time and the space to figure this out. Mm-hmm. They figure it out. Mm-hmm. So I think we've seen it with engagement of our senior leaders. We've seen it with engagement of functional experts, and so I think I'm increasingly optimistic this can be solved. The question that remains open for me is can we get the alignment of the incentives and motivations in place that will enable us to tap into our potential to do so.
Right. And what gives me hope is, having done this work for years, I have never, to Dexter's point, I've never seen a company that set an ambitious goal and that has actually incorporated the actions necessary to accomplish that into its business, not continue to do more and more and more and step higher and higher and higher. And these are companies that I see the ripple effect through their supply chains. It's still not fast enough, but what else gives me hope is my daughter. There's just a whole new mindset and a new set of expectations that are coming, and I really value that and appreciate that. So thank you all for just a wonderful conversation.